Hi, everybody. This is Ronelle Delmont again, and I haven't been around for a while. I've been busy trying to write my book, but the fellow who's here with me this morning has written how many books, Jim? I've got two
Uh,
in my
Three
hand,
books on the Lindbergh kidnapping.
three on Lindbergh, and how many others? Any?
One other, and I'm working on two right now. I'm working on another one on Lindbergh about Paul Wendell,
Ah, good.
which
So,
nobody has written about.
oh, yeah. Well, Wendell wrote about himself.
Well, yeah, right.
So I'm holding up, I don't know, because I've got this picture behind me. I don't know, is that, can you see that? Your
Yeah,
ch-
I can see it.
Okay, because I'm not sure. The strange things happen when I put a picture behind myself. So when the circus came to town is a lot of fun to read. Oh, I'm holding it up, but it's not. There it is. That was last year, and it's got lots of interesting things. You know what's so surprising is that there's no ladder on eBay that I've ever seen. They were selling those ladders.
I know. I knew a
Promotion.
guy who made them. I had a very interesting career because,
Wait. Let me show my your other book, the new one. Wait. Don't get
okay,
so carried away. So this one just came out. It's called The Other Lindbergh Kidnapping Trial, and it's about Charles. What's his name?
John Curtis.
John Hughes Curtis and Gaston Means. But get back to when the circus came to town, and somebody did write a book with this title, but I'm not sure what it was about. Anyway, go ahead. I made a comment that the ladder is being sold in front of the courthouse in Flemington. Not one of them have I ever seen on eBay in 30 years.
No, nor have I. The only one I ever saw was when they had that huge exhibit down in Princeton that went for a year on the Lindberghs, and Yale University or Mark Trelzini from the archives brought one in. It was the only one I'd ever seen.
How
But
did
I
you
did
handle
run into somebody at one of my talks who said they actually made them.
it?
So I had a very interesting career because I grew up in Flemington. And the first time I heard about the Lindbergh kidnapping, my parents told me that they lived in Trenton during the execution, and they went to the Hotel Hildebrecht, which was right down the street, where they had all kinds of. It was a they had a big band. My mother wore a pink silk dress. She said my father was in a white dinner jacket, and Gabriel Heater broadcast the thing from right down the road, and my parents said when they executed him and they flipped the switch, all the lights dimmed in the hotel.
Right.
But then, growing up in Flemington, my father's attorney was Lloyd Fisher.
Mm.
So I knew him. And the person that found the Lindbergh baby, William Allen, worked for my grandfather. And I also knew him. He was a tall black guy that always wore bib overalls and smoked a big cigar. One of the jurors, May Belsford, was my neighbor, and I used to go as a kid over to her house at Halloween. But growing up in town, I knew so many people that had relationships with the trial. One of my best friends, his father hawked newspapers, and he would solicit men for the prostitutes. The town was filled with prostitutes, and they would give him a finder's fee of 25 cents and for every John that they got. And I did, I every week or so we would walk up to the hotel and have dinner in the hotel. And I just had so many, what's the word I'm looking for? So
Connect
many, yeah, help me out here on the
connections.
connections, that when I did that, when the circus came to town, I talked to so many people that had relations. I talked to one woman who was in her 90s who the police actually searched her baby carriage and took her diapers off to see if it was the Lindbergh baby.
Right.
And in one of my talks in the courthouse, I was showing a picture, and you may know it because it's in a lot of books, where three kids are stacked up trying to look in Lindbergh's cell, and the one kid, this
No,
one
no,
guy jumps
Hauptmann,
up,
Hauptmann.
Hartman cell, and this guy, elderly guy, jumps up and says, "That's me on the bottom," and he was the one that was telling me about making ladders, and he would come home from school, make ladders, and sell them the next day. He also had an incredible autograph book with everybody's signature but Lindbergh, because as you know, Lindbergh never gave out a signature to anybody.
Mm.
So I spent a long time doing that book because I went through probably at least 15 or 20 full sets of newspapers. Matter of fact, one of my friends moved into the house of one of the jurors and up in the attic found 7 complete sets of newspapers that they had collected from the trial and gave them to me. And after I read them all, I passed them on to Mark Falzini, who was gone but not forgotten.
Yeah. Well,
So
speaking of newspapers, you've got Jay Langley writing the forward for this.
I do.
He's
He's written forwards for
hunting.
me twice. He was well, his father-in-law was Mr. Monroe, who was head of the Democrat during the trial, and he had a special pass made, a press pass that he flashed every time he went in, although everybody in town knew him. And then Jay took over in 1970, working for the paper, and eventually was the editor until they sold it about 2015-ish, something like that.
Oh, they sold it. Oh,
Yeah, they sold it.
so, but isn't that paper connected with David Willents later on? Because he was the Pope of Perth Amboy, I think they called
Well,
Willents. From the trial, he'd never done. He was the Attorney General,
he
and
was the Attorney General, right?
he'd never prosecuted a murder case.
That's
And
right. But I'm
he,
not sure how the Democrats connected to him except following his stories and everything. But
right.
one of the things that Jay said that was very interesting, he came from New York State and didn't know a whole lot about the Lindbergh trial, but every 10 years, 15 years on the anniversary, they'd all have to do stuff. But the crazy thing is, all these various people that were, we'll say, Lindbergh pretenders, the baby pretenders,
Right.
would show up in his office and start taking their clothes off to show him all the different
You
things.
wrote that in your book. It was so funny. I was
Yeah.
I could picture them because I knew some of them because we went on the Bronx tours every year with Richard Sloan.
Mhm.
And I've forgotten all their names, but they would come on the tours and
Well,
I
Kenneth Kerwin,
yeah, Kenneth.
uh,
Yeah.
my favorite is Harold Olson, but he probably died before he went on the tours. But I had an interesting contact with him. When he passed away, he gave all of his research materials to Hunterdon County.
Mhm.
And the head of the County Cultural and Heritage Commission called me up and said, "We have a truckload of files from somebody by the name of Harold Olson." I said, "Oh my God." And I went down there and I started going through all these files, which were kind of beyond me. I mean, there was so much stuff. So that's how I met Mark Falzini,
Oh,
because I had all that stuff truckloaded down to Trenton to the museum, and then he had to categorize everything, and everything is in files down there now. And in meeting with Mark, we used to have lunch together, and I said, there's probably a dozen photographs in every book that are the same. We ought to try to research photographs. And he and I went out on a search. We went all over. Actually, the best experience, we went to Jersey City to the library archives. And
mhm.
this little old lady with pink hair came out and said, "How did you find out about the pictures we have?" They were from the Detective Walsh from Jersey City. And they
Mm,
had a huge file of pictures that we had never seen. There was 100 and some pictures in there. So
yeah,
we brought a scanner with us, and she said, "You're only allowed to scan 10 pictures."
really?
And we were both salivating. So um, I said to the woman, let me take you out to lunch. And while I was out to lunch with this woman who was really crazy, she told me all about every medical condition she ever had. Mark stayed in the library and scanned all 110 pictures.
Wow.
And that's how we ended up with that pictorial history of the trial, New Jersey's Lindbergh kidnapping and trial. And I think we only used about 5 or 6 pictures of hers, but
Oh,
I
I-
probably have 1,000 pictures related to the trial in my personal
you
collection.
probably got the biggest collection anybody can
Maybe.
have. Oh,
Although Nancy, our friend, joint friend
yeah.
Nancy Attardo has a
I
ton
I
too.
wonder though, Jim, if you're aware, because we've never met. This is the first time I'm actually seeing you. Unless you did come on a bus tour that I was on. I don't
No,
remember
I
meeting you.
never did.
So are you aware that they've closed down the archive? Did you hear about it?
Well, it's open again.
Oh,
I
when
was
did
just
that?
down 2 months ago doing research. They closed the whole thing down to put new carpet in. They moved everything out. And the new guy in there, Greg Ferreira,
Yeah.
who has come to some of my talks, he knew nothing about the Lindbergh kidnapping and came and found a warehouse full of files. It was just a mess. But I went up there. Actually, I talked to him yesterday. I went up there um, maybe 2 months ago, and everything was back together and it's open again. So
I thought it's been closed down this week. I was told it just closed down again. So maybe I got the wrong news.
well, I don't know. I talked to him yesterday
Oh,
because, and you'll find this interesting. You know, the woman who was the black Lindbergh baby,
whatever happened to her? I don't even know.
Genevieve Cato was her name.
Uh-huh.
And I found out she actually published a pamphlet, which
Yeah.
I had never heard of.
Uh-huh.
And I started tracking this stuff down, and lo and behold, they have a copy of it in the archives, and the Trenton Library has a copy. So I'll be going up shortly, and if it's not too long, I'm going to Xerox it.
That's a very curious thing because whatever gave her the idea that I
She
mean,
had a boyfriend who was supposedly in the CIA, and she was in her pamphlet. She said she was born a hermaphrodite with both sets of organs,
okay.
and they
Now I
cut off the male organs and then dyed her black. But
They dyed her skin black. Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, let's get to Curtis.
John Curtis.
Your book is very. I read it, very quickly, but I know a lot of the things about him, but so much in your book I never heard of, like this guy Truesdale. I don't remember him.
Right.
I've
Well,
never
what was
paid much
interesting
attention.
is I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time in Flemington at the Historical Society. And in reading about the trial and other stuff, every once in a while they refer to so and so was also at the Curtis trial. And
Mhm.
I'm thinking, what the heck is this? So, probably 4 or 5 years ago, when Mark Falzini was still at the archives, I went down and I got everything they had down there on John Curtis. Plus, I talked to his granddaughter, and
Is she still alive? Are you
oh
talking
yeah, her name is
about long-term?
Dr. Law. She was the dean of a college,
Uh-huh.
and she's about 75-ish, something like that. So
So
anyway, I started researching this, and I was amazed at this story. You read about John Curtis as a little footnote here and
right.
there in virtually any book. And I sat down to write, a story of him. And what was interesting is I always thought the New Jersey State Police was the most corrupt organization going during the Lindbergh era. It was only when Mark Kimberling took it over after Schwarzkopf that it became more of a legitimate police force. And you start reading the stories that Lloyd Fisher wrote and a lot of other people wrote about the state police. Mark Falzini, in his book about the massacre of the Battle of Jutland, talks about how corrupt they were. And this is what happened to John Curtis. He ended up it was the strangest story because he was a pillar of society in Norfolk, and he um, comes out of the country club one night. He was on the board. He had been president of the country club, and at that particular time, he was president of the Norfolk Yacht Club. He was real high up in society down there. And lo and behold, this guy that he vaguely remembered, because Curtis had a big boat building business, one of the biggest boat building businesses in the South. He met this guy when a boat was brought in to be repaired. And the guy said, I was contacted by the gang that uh, kidnapped the Lindbergh baby. They have the baby off the coast of Virginia, and they want you and a couple other people, if you can put them together, to come and act as the intermediary. And they said, but we do have somebody working up north with Lindbergh already. And this was long before anybody knew about John Condon being involved with Lindbergh. So
Wait,
he didn't.
wait. This is the part that I'm curious about that gets confusing. You're somewhere along the line, there's a moment where somebody from Norfolk says something that's not yet happened in the
Right.
Bronx. So
Right.
is this the moment you're referring to?
Yes.
Explain
This guy
that.
tells
Yeah.
Curtis that there is somebody that Lindbergh is already dealing with that's part of their gang in the Bronx.
What date is this that
Well, this is
Sam
well,
meets
I
with?
think Condon got involved, what, about the
No,
6th
no,
or 8th of March, something like that.
right. So
Yeah,
this,
and that's exactly when they contacted John Curtis.
so something's okay. What do you make of it?
Well, I think Curtis was dealing with the gang, and it was the same gang that actually kidnapped the baby,
Uh-huh.
because later on in the book, when they arrest Hauptman and his picture shows up in the newspaper, uh, Curtis recognizes this guy as a person that he remembered from being in the gang. So
But he wanted to go there to actually see Hauptman face to face, and they wouldn't let him.
they wouldn't let him because after spending 3 years saying there was a gang that kidnapped the baby, and Hauptman wouldn't say that he was part of a gang, then they go to the lone wolf theory.
Right.
And Lloyd Fisher was going crazy because he thought that John Curtis was going to come back and identify Hauptman. And it was Lloyd Fisher who had been Curtis's defense attorney.
Right.
So it was pretty crazy. So to go back to Curtis, he doesn't know what to do. And he's very hesitant about even getting involved. But his wife says, go talk to the local minister in the church down here. And he did. And he talks with this Reverend Dobson Peacock. And Peacock says, oh, you have to do this. It's your moral responsibility. And then they go and they talk to Admiral Burridge, who Lindbergh knew because he was the captain of the Memphis when they brought the airplane back from France, and they had continued a relationship. So then they contact Lindbergh, but Lindbergh was already dealing with Condon, so they kind of put him on the back burner, put Curtis and his associates, and they were on the back burner until the ransom was paid, and then they didn't get the baby back. And after a week or so, Lindbergh actually contacted Curtis and said, are you still in contact with this group? And Curtis said, yes. So then they run back and forth between Curtis and Peacock, and Burridge run back and forth between Norfolk and Hopewell. And then Curtis had some meetings with the people in New York City, and they took them and they showed them the rest of the gang that were living in Newark at the time. And they said, well, we have the baby off of Virginia. So they go down and they kind of work out of Cape May. And Lindbergh goes down and takes a hotel room in Cape May. And it's very interesting because Lindbergh had total control, not control, but he could get anything he wanted from the Navy. And the Navy said, well, if you want to make this exchange, we'll make a plane available that can land right next to the boat, take the kid. And Lindbergh says, no, I don't want to do that. We'll go out and try to find them out in the ocean. And they have 5 attempts. And every time they go out, either in one case, Lindbergh misses the whole rendezvous point. The other times they had such terrible weather that they all come back, and Curtis is following all this, and he is absolutely convinced that this is the gang and they have the baby. And the night that they're supposed to make this exchange was the night Schwarzkopf called up and said, we found a corpse outside of Hopewell.
Mhm.
So
Right.
that was when
Well,
Curtis goes back to Hopewell and is basically kept prisoner for a week at the Hopewell house.
they didn't go back together. Lindbergh
No,
flew back and
no, Lindbergh drove himself back from
right,
Cape May, and it was a
right,
really bad rainstorm. And then Curtis went to Absecon, and a state policeman drove him back.
yeah.
So,
So I'm a little confused about, I've always been on this issue. What in the world were they doing for something like 2 weeks? Wasn't it a long time they were out there on the water in these
oh
boats,
yeah,
Marcon
and
and I thought Sikorsky had given him a seaplane, but no, you mean the Navy gave him that?
the Navy made one available to him.
Oh, because he took it from Connecticut, from Bridgeport, where
Yeah, originally when
so
they
that's
looked for
where
the money.
Sikorsky had all the flying boats. But here I'm asking you, what do you think they were doing for 2 weeks? They, if they didn't
Well,
have the baby in one day, 2 days, come back. I mean, what were they doing?
well, let me
It's
tell
a
you,
lame
it's
joke.
kind of interesting because the people on board, Curtis came back and told Lloyd Fisher this whole story, who had a stenographer take down everything. And then
Uh-huh.
Lloyd Fisher wrote a 7-part Liberty article about it, which was, you know,
Mhm.
in there, Curtis, through Fisher, talks about how Lindbergh was just having a great time. He took a
Exactly.
machine gun on board. They were shooting guns. He said
What?
he never, oh, yeah, he
I'm
never,
ashamed that I don't remember hearing that.
oh, yeah. Lindbergh took a machine gun on board because he figured he might be kidnapped. And everybody had guns and they were shooting target practice. And
Love that.
Lindbergh was like a vacation, Curtis said. He didn't
Exactly.
seem to be real concerned about getting the baby back.
Right. It was a vacation. Yeah.
So,
So you don't, I should have asked you this. What do you think happened to, I mean, do you think Lindbergh was responsible in some way for his child's death?
well, we're going there already.
All
Let
right.
me finish
Take your
Curtis and
time.
then we'll get there.
All right.
Because
Go ahead.
that's like me asking you if you think that was the Lindbergh baby they found.
Oh,
So,
I do. I do.
yeah, okay.
That's the real baby. Yeah. I do
So,
think it was the real one. Yeah.
so anyway,
But
uh,
anything, I mean, it could be wrong, but
well, Curtis, you know, here's this guy trying to help out. He didn't ask for any money. He spent his own money during this time. His wife is sick as anything, and he's running around with Lindbergh the whole time. And it's like, why is this? What's the motivation for this?
right,
Except for being a good Samaritan.
right.
Well, as soon as they get him back to Hopewell, Schwarzkopf gets involved, and Schwarzkopf says, this guy did it. And he puts all the might of the state police and the press against Condon just to take the pressure off of the state police. So Curtis is
Oh,
held captive in Lindbergh's house for a week. For 4 or 5 days, he wasn't allowed to make a phone call to his wife. He wasn't allowed to shower or shave. At one point, he was kept in a room in the basement where they had the ladder stored and all the clothes from the baby. And
oh,
uh, he wrote that he started taking numbers of the parts on the boiler in case he eventually had to prove that he was held
Yes,
captive
yes.
and everything, they would know it, because he said nobody will believe this story. So then they have two crews of policemen that would interrogate him, and he'd be interrogated almost, like 16 hours straight, and he was exhausted. He was in such physical shape. He lost like 15 or 20 pounds while he was there. Finally, they said, look, if you sign this confession that this was all a hoax that you did, we'll just let you go back to Virginia, and it will never come out that you signed this. So at 4:30 in the morning, he signed this confession, and then they arrested him and threw him in jail in Flemington.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and then in June of 32 and into July, he had a trial. And I think the craziest thing about the whole trial was that there was this really famous attorney in Flemington by the name of Harry Stout. And Lloyd Fisher was like a young pup in the attorney's world.
Oh,
He had only been in practice for a couple of years. So Stout actually was involved in the Jutland Battle of Jutland, defending the people there. And it ended up that Curtis hires this guy from a friend of his, an attorney from Virginia, to come up as the lead attorney. His name was William Pender, but he has to have a New Jersey attorney. So he interviews Stout. Stout interviews Curtis, and they said, this is the biggest fake case that the state police have ever brought. We can get you out of this. And then instead of hiring Stout, they hire Lloyd Fisher, and Stout is so aggravated. He goes the night before the trial and meets with Schwarzkopf and Lindbergh, has dinner at the Hopewell House, and they change the entire indictment the night before. And Lloyd Fisher walks into the courtroom and he sees Stout sitting at the prosecution table with Lindbergh and Tony Hawk. And he's like, what the hell's going on here? And he has to change his whole defense that Curtis didn't know the gang. So, and then it was such a trumped up case. He got a year in prison and $1,000 fine. And Lloyd Fisher went down, got bail money, met with the people, friends of his in Norfolk, got bail money. And eventually they changed the judge at the time, this Adam Robbins,
Robbins.
changed the whole count to just $1,000 fine. And I thought it was great because Curtis whips out $1,000 bill and pays
Right,
his fine,
right.
and that's it.
You didn't clarify. I think people listening to you might get a little confused, but the switcheroo that they pulled on Fisher, the the charges originally were that it was a hoax and that he knew nobody.
Right, exactly.
And then when he shows up on that morning, Stout had all the files because uh, he had been on the defense side. Now he's on the prosecution side,
Prosecution.
sitting with the prosecution. And now they've done this. I couldn't believe this part of the story because I wasn't aware of it till I read your book. They just completely overnight switched to, well, he did know the people.
Yeah.
He did know the kidnappers, and he mixed himself in, and what were the charge was he actually, what's the wording of the charge? That instead of it being a hoax, he was actually involved with them, knew who they were, and
Didn't tell the police.
didn't
That was
tell.
the charge, that he didn't tell
Oh,
the
that he
police.
didn't. Okay, that was so. What do you call that kind of a charge? What was the legal? I forgot what you wrote in the book. The legal charge against him, what they were trying him for, was outrageous. The whole thing was outrageous. So how did they put Hauptmann on trial for being a lone kidnapper? Makes it so. I
I
got
know.
very angry reading your book. I have to tell you, you made me feel. I couldn't put it down because I was getting angrier with every page I turned. It's Alice in Wonderland is what it
I
is.
know. It's just one more crazy thing about the Lindbergh kidnapping.
And the corruption of the police and everyone all the way up to David Wilentz. I don't know how these people slept at night for the rest of their lives. I don't know how, after manipulating those two trials, and then at the end of your book, the Lindbergh kidnapping trial book, you've got uh, another character, another thing that makes me so angry. Not because he stole money from the lady with the Hope Diamond, but because
Oh, Gaston Means.
yes, Gaston Means, and
So,
he interviewed his granddaughter. That's amazing.
well, Gaston Means was the craziest part of my research. And I hadn't planned on writing anything about Gaston Means. But when you start reading these newspapers, and I'm sure you have a subscription to
Yeah,
newspapers.com, and you start reading this stuff, John Condon's articles, John Curtis articles, and Gaston Means articles are on the same page.
right,
And
right,
when you start talking about Gaston Means, not only was the biggest crook and shyster ever,
right,
but I think I really believe that John Curtis was in contact with the gang. And somehow I think Gaston Means, as crooked as he was, also was somewhat in contact because he came up with stuff that Lindbergh verified prior to it being made public.
like the
And
sleeping suit. You said,
yeah, so I know that Mike Belsky is going to do a big thing on Gaston Means coming up, and I've talked to um, Gaston Means' granddaughter who lives in Delaware,
mhm.
and she's working on a book.
Oh, cool.
So I don't know. She says she knows where the money is.
Oh, that would be nice.
If I knew where the money is, I'd get it and spend it real quick. But
Yeah, yeah. Well,
anyway,
how can you
and
spend bills with yellow seals on them?
yeah, well,
Does the bank take them anymore?
I don't know. But anyway, yeah, it was an experience. Gaston Means, there's only one chapter on him, and you see Gaston Means written up in all the various books, but it just says he's defrauding. He had such a life of crime
Right.
prior to
I
meeting
couldn't
Evelyn.
believe it. You give all the numbers. How many? 44 times he was indicted or
Yeah, he
convicted?
was indicted 44 times and only convicted twice.
Unbelievable. And the whole story, I knew about this 20 years ago, and totally you brought it back to life in my head. The whole that that King lady who shot herself in the back of the head.
Yeah,
She hated guns, she hated pistols. Come on, let's go shooting. And she goes along with this
yeah.
crackpot,
He says she committed suicide by
committed
shooting
suicide in
herself
the
in the
back of the.
back of the head.
Oh my goodness, these are, you know, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I will write other books about side crazy things,
Good, good.
like coming up like Paul Wendell.
What
But
are you going to do with that? Because he wrote his own book.
well, yeah, he did. Everybody wrote that. Matter of fact, I think somebody should write a book on John Condon.
I
Nobody has ever done that. That would be really crazy.
don't know how they wouldn't go into an insane asylum
I
trying.
know, just writing about him.
But the Wendell, where do I have the Wendell thing for? I know I read Wendell's version of it.
Well, and
Didn't
the
publish it.
Master Detective about Ellis Parker, there's a couple chapters about him there. But
Right.
then Wendell wrote a series of articles for Liberty Magazine. And then he ended up suing the state of New Jersey and wrote a book about his suit against the state of New Jersey.
Oh, is that
So,
what I read? I must have gotten it from Mark. I have an unpublished something. Well, everybody, even Rossner wrote a memoir that's not published.
who?
Mickey Rossner. He
Oh,
has
yeah.
a unpublished memoir that I've got it from Mark. I got all this stuff 20 years ago. Don't you? Well, Mickey Rossner wrote his, I don't know if it was meant as a memoir that he was going to publish, but his notes. They're very hard to read, but
I
everybody,
always thought it was funny that Mickey Rosser ended up being a sheriff in California.
he did.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah,
Wow.
in some
Was a
town in
sheriff in
California.
California. Oh my goodness. And didn't Bits, one of them ended up in Long Island, a sheriff? Who was that? I don't know. So you're going to write about Wendell. You've already started gathering.
Yeah, I've been gathering for years, but
Yeah.
I'm writing a book on Hunterdon County right now. Gruesome and grisly murders of Hunterdon County.
Oh,
And
well,
having lived in Hunterdon County for 75 years,
wow.
there was a lot to write about.
The pig lady. Are you going to do that?
No, that was in Somerset County.
Oh, that's the wrong
Yes, the Halls Mills case.
Paul's Mills case, right? That I think Ellis Parker was part of that, and Schwarzkopf. What was wrong with Schwarzkopf in your opinion? Why doesn't somebody write a book about him? He's got quite a history.
You know, Mark has written a lot about the state police, and he was always very um, defensive. Um, but
Well,
I think he's written something, not published, but I think he's written something for the state police
oh,
about Schwarzkopf.
oh,
Yeah, I think he was so inept, he didn't know what was going on, not just in here, but in other instances. In my book, I talk about how in South Jersey they were arresting cops all the time. One of them was running a brothel out of his office. Another one, group of people were going and what's the term I'm thinking of? Bribing bar owners, were paying protection money, and they had like hundreds of people in the course of Schwarzkopf's term get thrown out of the state police because of their behavior. Um, they arrested 30 state troopers in the Jutland massacre that Mark wrote about. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's
I
a great
didn't read the
book.
book, but can you quickly mention what happened there? There was an invasion, 20
Well, this was, I think, in 1929, if I'm not mistaken.
in 28, you said, or you
28, was it? Okay.
you have it in your.
I'm glad you read my book.
Oh, I love your book. Yeah, I
So
read.
anyway, uh, this farmer had a dispute with his neighbor over a cow, and the SPCA got involved, and the farmer wouldn't do what the SPCA said. So they called the state cops, and this thing just kept escalating out of control. And finally, they had uh, dozens of cops there, and they started shooting into this guy's house. His name was Thomas Meany, and his
Why?
wife hid in a closet, and she got hit 3 or 4 times
Oh,
while in the closet. And they had over 300 bullet holes in this guy's
oh my
house. Oh, this is
God.
over a cow. And they suspended 30 troopers for this, but several of them, I think 8 of them, went to trial. And Harry Stout from our Lindbergh book, he didn't defend them. He was the attorney for the Meanies. But everybody involved in the Curtis trial was involved in the Meany trial. Judge Trenchard, by the way,
Oh,
heard the case.
oh.
And then everybody involved in the Curtis trial was involved in the Haltman trial. It's pretty strange.
It's not strange. It's a small town. Why is it strange? It's not New York City where you have a million judges and
Yeah, exactly.
people. They're small towns. Everybody. That's part of the problem, I think, with these trials. Well, the Hauptmann trial, because they wanted to do right by Lindbergh. You even say that somewhere in the Curtis.
Yeah, the jury was so confused about what was going on in the Curtis trial. They said, "Well, look, Lindbergh has been hurt by all this. He's living in our county. We got to do something good for him." So they found the guy guilty, and then it was guilty with mercy, hoping that Curtis would just walk free. But the
right.
prosecution under Tony Hawk didn't go with that. So I just want to mention one thing that
Yeah.
I thought is so much of a coincidence. You know, Flemington was a small town then. It's not much bigger now. And at the end of my book, I said, what happened to these different people? And I talk about what happened to Curtis and Lloyd Fisher. And I found this out in Mark Falzini's 15 minutes book. So Tony Hawk lived in Flemington, not too far from where I grew up, and I actually knew his son. But in the 60s, he got involved in investing
Oh, yeah, yeah.
in a mine out west. And he had this engineer from the mine stay at his house all the time. And the engineer was raping his daughter, apparently.
Was that true? She
Oh
accused
yeah,
him of
yeah,
it.
it's all
What?
over the newspapers, and she ended up pulling a gun and
Fun.
shooting the guy. Unfortunately, she didn't kill him. So,
Oh, he
who
lived.
does Tony Hawk get to defend his daughter but
Lloyd
Lloyd
Fisher.
Fisher?
Right.
And this trial went on for years, by the way,
Oh,
and
why?
the guy ended up being
Getting money.
awarded. The guy who was raping the daughter was awarded $100,000 because Tony Hawk left a live gun around that his daughter could get. And
This is
people actually have been looking for his daughter. Mike Melsky asked me, have you tracked down the daughter? And I said, well, I looked, but I haven't found her because she probably is still alive, whether she's in Hunterdon County or not. But
She's probably in Florida. You
yeah,
should look down here
yeah,
because I am addicted to Forensic Files. You know that program, Forensic Files?
yes,
Half-hour episodes. I've been watching them for 25 years. I know them backward and forward. And I can tell you the majority of the felons and the majority of the rapists and the killers and whoever it is that did whatever in Colorado and Idaho, they're all here in Florida, all of them. They all end up at the IHOP or somewhere.
yeah.
I'm making a joke, and it's not nice to say things like that about my state, my adoptive state. But I'm telling you, they run away. They come down here. I don't know why. So look for what's her name. I'll try to find her for you.
I better not say this,
What?
but it's in the book. But I thought
Oh,
that
I
was so
don't
funny
remember.
that,
Yeah, the name is in the book, but surely she changed it. People,
well, she might have gotten married. Who knows? Probably got married.
I'll try to track her down. I'm sure she's in Florida. She's living in a condo or a retirement. How old is
Maybe your neighbor.
she? Might be, well, I don't know, unless she speaks Espanol or Pakistani, or all my neighbors are from everywhere on earth, which I love. I'll try. I have met so many people because I do what you do. I give lectures all over in 3 counties. And over the years, like for instance, a couple of this was last year actually. I was giving a lecture in Boca Raton in a retirement community, and I was telling them about Lindbergh switching the kerosene, switching the water. What he did
Yeah,
to Bud Gurney, for people who
right.
don't know, Lindbergh played a prank on his friend Bud Gurney and switched what Gurney thought was water. Lindbergh had put kerosene in the glass. So I was telling them this, and a woman in the front row looked like she was fainting. She keeled over. I said, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" She says, "What was the name you just said?" The name Bud Gurney. Bud Gurney's my best friend. The woman was the 40 years the close friend of Bud Gurney's son, who was Bud Gurney Jr.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
They
that's amazing.
the
So I
father.
did a talk one time,
So,
and this woman came up to me and said that her mother was 95 years old. And because of the Lindbergh kidnapping, she was afraid somebody would break in her house,
yeah.
that she kept a chair against her bedroom doorknob all the way up through 95. But I had a woman approach me at one of my talks. It's always good to talk to senior citizens because they always
Who
know
else?
about Lindbergh and are
Who
involved.
else?
But I
Fifty.
had a woman who was at Lindbergh's parade in New York City
Oh
and
God.
showed me a picture of when she was a little girl holding an American flag with him passing in front of her in
Oh
the
my God.
yeah.
Only old people. Uh, I've found 50-year-olds who never heard of Lindbergh.
Oh yeah. We ought
Have
to live in
never.
Asheville. Nobody knows Lindbergh and I shouldn't say
I,
that because Lindbergh used to vacation here at the Grove Park Inn, which was a
he
real,
did.
yeah,
In what decade was that? I'm interested in
well,
knowing.
I'm assuming the 30s, 20s, or
Because
probably the
you know,
30s.
you know why I'm interested in that. A guy that used to live in your neck of the woods, not a very nice person, named William Dudley Pelley, for whom Lindbergh answered the summons and went to the sedition trial in Indiana. You know about that?
No.
Well, just check around your neighborhood for signs of William Dudley Pelley. He was the American Führer. He was a Hitlerite. And you don't know who that was? Okay.
No.
Well, maybe I shouldn't have told you. But your neighborhood, Asheville, was the headquarters of a Nazi organization called the Silver Shirts. And when Pelley, Pelley, was put on trial in Indiana for sedition, and they did send him to jail. Um, when he was put on trial for sedition, Lindbergh was a witness there. He
Huh.
he obeyed this. He didn't have to. The
Did
other.
he sit? Did Lindbergh sit at the prosecution table?
Oh, is that something? Your book is so mind blowing. The things that you couldn't help it. I mean, you put all the facts into your book that you seem to have culled all the information from the newspaper, anything that had to do with Curtis. Not so much Means because he's only a
Yeah,
chapter,
sidebar.
but I really appreciate this book because I have like hundreds of books in this room, and I'd have to go through like Wayne Jones. I got Wayne Jones. It's 1,000 pages. I could barely hold the book in my
I
hand.
know.
So you put all this stuff. I never heard of the Virginia Pilot. Is that the name of the newspaper that
Yep.
you?
It's still around too.
It is really. I never heard of it. And you use, of course, the Huntington Democrat newspaper. But you've taken all the stuff from the Liberty article and you've made a readable story that's so ridiculous. I mean, weren't these people ashamed of themselves? The only
Yeah.
one who stands out as honorable, of course, is Fisher, Lloyd Fisher, right?
And John Curtis. I mean,
Yes,
I think
yeah,
he was a
I
very
agree.
honorable person that got swept up in this thing,
Yeah.
persecuted, and then cast aside at the very end.
You don't think that he might have been the butt of a hoax that people were perpetrating on
No,
him? You
no,
don't.
I don't.
So you do
It's
think he was in touch with the real people?
I do because he was smart enough. If he felt that this was just a hoax, I mean, first of all, why would he get involved in it if
If
he
he
didn't
didn't
think it was
believe,
the real gang?
right?
And since he wasn't uh, asking for any money at all, I mean, why would he waste it? Was he ended up from May through into July
Right. Mhm.
tied up with this whole Lindbergh thing,
Right. But
wasting.
wasn't he bankrupt? I think you do mention it. It's usually mentioned in every book that he needed money. His shipbuilding was. Now, that's the part I wanted to ask you, because in the beginning you were saying he was the most successful shipbuilder. It was his. I think you don't say it in the book, but I assumed it was the family business, his father's business before him. So why
Um,
did he need money, and why was he broke?
well, I think the business went bankrupt because this was the Depression.
Yeah.
Every business went bankrupt,
Yeah.
but he had family money that they were living off of through
Oh,
his wife.
oh,
That must be time to end this. But anyway, he pulled that shipbuilding business out of the Depression and it became successful again. So since he never asked for money,
right,
you
right,
know, I think it's a moot point. If he was,
right.
trying to
I am
shake down
confused.
Lindbergh, then that's something else.
Right. He didn't seem to be looking for the payoff for himself,
Right.
like
Well,
Gaston Means, whatever happened to that money. I wish you could do this again. I could write down a whole list of more questions.
I think we should because we agreed on a time limit and
Right.
we've hit that time limit.
Okay.
So I think we should end this now, but have a part two, and then we can talk about our various theories about who did it, was it the baby,
Do
etc.
you do that in your lectures? Do you give the audience your own opinions?
Well, I try not to because every single time, and I'm sure you find it when you talk too, somebody is going to ask, well, who do you think did it? So I always tell them it was alien abduction.
No, no, everybody knows who I think did it because I've got the Lindbergh Kidnapping hoax website. Everybody knows I think Lindbergh did it.
Oh yeah, well, I
I
think so
don't have
too.
that problem that you have. I'm not a, my website was started in 1998 because of Jay Langley, by the way.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
oh
He,
yeah,
he wrote a letter to a 16-year-old Pennsylvania student who put up a website that Hauptmann was innocent, and he told her she was using pictures from his newspaper and she had to take it down. So she got hysterical, the poor girl. And I kept telling her, you got the only website online about this story. Please don't take it down. Please don't take it down. And she kept saying, no, I got to take it down. I'm scared. I'm scared. He wrote a letter and he called the principal, and my father's going to kill. So you know what she did? She sent me the hard disk. Got them in the mail. I was the only person who ever contacted her, I guess. The website was up a week and she sent me the discs. That was 1998.
oh well,
And Jay Langley is responsible for my website in that sense because he scared her. I told her you know, anyway, I was friends with, what's his name? Bettman. What's his first name? He's dead a long time. The Bettman archive guy. What's his
oh
first?
yeah, okay,
Because I used to he came to my lectures, and Otto Bettman, and I went to him and I asked him, what should this girl do? The the editor of a newspaper is telling her that she's got photographs on her website that belong to his newspaper, and what's going to be the future? And this was a very 1998. And Otto Bettman said to me, I just sold my whole, he had just sold everything to Bill
Getty,
Gates. It became the Gates archive. He had just sold
Getty,
Bettman to who?
isn't
Getty?
it Getty archive?
Maybe it was, no, it's Getty now, but originally he told me he sold it to Gates.
Okay,
But anyway, this was in 1998. My memory is usually good. And Otto said to me, the truth is nobody knows because the internet was so new. Nobody really knew the legalities of using photographs that belonged to old newspapers, or nobody really
right,
knew what to do. There was no fair usage for educational purposes. Uh, I don't even know if it's settled to this day. But so anyway, I'm just telling you, you could tell Jay, in case he didn't know, he's responsible for a website that's gone on for 25 years that absolutely believes Hauptmann was completely innocent. I'm sure nobody believes that except me and a couple of people. Uh, I would love to hear what your take is on.
all right. Well, that'll be on part two then.
Good, good, and maybe part 3 too. Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Thank
Well, it was nice doing this interview with you,
you.
Ronelle, and I
Thank
look forward to doing it again.
Good.
All
Very.
right. Take care. Bye.
So take care. Bye bye. I'm going to stop the recording.
Oh, can we still talk?
Yes.
Okay.
Stop recording, pause, stop.